The blue and red lights flooded the inside of the black Escalade like a nightclub strobe, but there was no music, only tension. Magic Johnson's fingers rested calmly on the steering wheel at 10 and 2, his eyes watching the side mirror as the officer approached. It was supposed to be a quiet afternoon drive through Beverly Hills, but nothing about this felt normal. "License and registration," the officer barked, hand hovering a little too close to the holster. Magic glanced up. "Of course, officer. May I ask what I said license and registration, now." There it was, that edge in the voice. Not authority, contempt. Johnson slowly reached for his wallet, deliberate and careful. Decades of fame hadn't made him immune to this kind of encounter, but it had taught him how to survive it. The cop scanned the documents, then looked back at him. "Magic Johnson, huh?" he scoffed, lips curling. "Still driving through neighborhoods you don't belong in. Why don't you go back to Africa?" Silence. The air inside the vehicle turned to stone. Magic blinked slowly, his face unreadable. Not anger, not fear, just something deeper, something ancestral. He looked the officer in the eyes and said, "You know, officer, that's the first time anyone's ever said that to me in a gated community I helped fund." The man's smirk faltered. Magic added, "Let's call your supervisor. I'd like to make sure we both get home safe. Don't miss what happens next. Subscribe and drop your thoughts in the comments. The story is just getting started." Sergeant Michelle Ortega stood in the precinct's break room when the call came in. A high-ranking officer had requested a supervisor on site in Beverly Hills, code 416A, disturbance involving a public figure. She tapped her earpiece. "Dispatch, who's the civilian?" A pause. "Irvin Johnson. Magic Johnson." Ortega's stomach turned, not out of fear but recognition. Magic had been her idol growing up in South Central, a symbol of excellence, dignity, and now he was in the middle of what? A routine traffic stop. When she arrived on the scene, the officer in question, Officer K. Donaldson, stood with his arms crossed, radiating disdain. Magic was calm, leaning against his car with his phone out. He looked up and offered a nod. "Sergeant," he greeted evenly. "Mr. Johnson," Ortega said, noting the body camera blinking red. "What happened here?" "I'd prefer to file a statement at the station," Magic said, eyes steady. "Some things don't need to play out on the sidewalk." Ortega glanced at Donaldson, whose jaw tightened. "Of course, officer, you're dismissed from this scene." He didn't move. "That wasn't a suggestion," she added. As Donaldson walked off, Magic said quietly, "It's not about me, it's about who comes next." Ortega looked at him, something shifting in her. "Then let's make sure they don't go through this alone." She opened the door to her cruiser. "Let's go talk." The precinct's filing room smelled like stale coffee and old toner ink. Sergeant Ortega pulled the door shut behind them, muffling the buzz of fluorescent lights and murmured voices outside. Magic sat across from her, posture relaxed, but his expression unreadable. She set a digital recorder on the desk. "This is just for clarity. You can request a copy at any time." He nodded. "Let's begin." Ortega pressed record. "Can you describe in your own words what happened today?" Magic inhaled. "I was driving home from a foundation meeting. I was pulled over without cause. The officer asked for my license and registration in a manner that was aggressive. I complied. He recognized me, then told me to go back to Africa." Ortega's jaw clenched slightly, but she kept her voice even. "Did he make any physical threats?" "No," Magic replied. "But the power behind the badge was the threat." She paused, considering his words. "Do you want to press charges?" Magic leaned forward. "I want him held accountable, not just for me, but because that badge should mean service, not superiority." Silence fell between them. Ortega finally said, "This won't be easy, but I'll help you navigate it." Magic offered a faint smile. "You just did, by listening." Outside the room, Donaldson passed by, glancing inside with a cold look. Magic didn't even blink. Some storms weren't weathered, they were confronted. The morning after the incident, Magic's phone buzzed non-stop. Texts, emails, missed calls from reporters. Someone had leaked the footage from the officer's body cam, and it was already making the rounds online. His wife, Cookie, stood in the kitchen watching the news with her arms folded. The anchor's voice was clipped. In a now viral video, LAPD officer Kevin Donaldson is heard telling NBA legend Magic Johnson to go back to Africa during a routine stop. Magic stepped into the room, coffee in hand. Cookie didn't say anything at first. Then softly, "You okay?" He nodded slowly. "I've been called worse, just never with a mic on." She turned to him. "You gonna respond publicly?" He sighed. "Not yet. The system has to speak first. If I talk now, it becomes about me, not what he represents." Just then his phone rang. Ortega. "Mr. Johnson," she said as he picked up. "Donaldson's been placed on administrative leave. Internal Affairs is opening an inquiry." "Good," Magic said, "but we both know that's the easy part." Ortega didn't argue. "It'll get noisy. Just stay steady." Magic ended the call and looked out the window. Down below, a news van was parking across the street. He turned to Cookie. "If I don't handle this right, every black kid with a dream sees that badge and feels smaller." Cookie walked over, put her hand on his chest. "Then remind them they're not." Officer Kevin Donaldson sat stiffly across from his union representative, a copy of the suspension notice trembling in his hand. The small conference room at the precinct felt colder than usual. "They're making an example of me," he muttered. The rep, a grizzled man named Barry Sloan, didn't respond immediately. He tapped a pen against his notepad, choosing his words. "Body cam footage is clear," Sloan said finally. "You crossed a line." Donaldson's voice rose. He was smug. "Just another celebrity thinking they're untouchable. I was doing my job." "Were you?" Sloan asked sharply. "Because what you said isn't policy. It's prejudice. And now you're the story." Donaldson's eyes flared. "They're twisting it. I didn't mean it like that." "But you said it." Outside the precinct, protests had begun. Small at first. Just a few people with signs, but they grew by the hour. News outlets aired footage on loop. Magic Johnson hadn't spoken since the leak, and that silence only magnified the weight of the incident. Donaldson looked out the tiny window and scoffed. "This is political." Sloan stood. "It's accountability." As the door shut behind his rep, Donaldson sat alone, finally confronting the thing he'd refused to name, the possibility that maybe, just maybe, the badge hadn't been enough to cover the man wearing it, and for the first time in his career, he didn't know what would come next. In Limert Park, just south of downtown LA, the sun hit the pavement hard, casting long shadows behind folding chairs and portable speakers. A community forum had been called together at the last minute, but the turnout was strong. Parents, students, teachers, clergy, and old-school activists sat side by side. The name Magic Johnson was on everyone's lips, but the conversation reached far beyond just him. Reverend Thompson stood at the front, holding the mic loosely. "This ain't just about one cop and one man. This is about us. This is about what we accept and what we demand." A teacher named Ms. Rawlings raised her hand. "My students watched that clip in homeroom, 6th graders. You should have seen their faces, like the world just slapped them." A teenager in a Lakers jersey stepped up, barely taller than the podium. "They say the system is broken, but I think it was built this way. And Mr. Johnson, he didn't yell, he didn't fight. He showed us power doesn't always shout." Applause rippled through the crowd. Meanwhile, in the back row, a retired LAPD officer named Sam Delaney sat quietly, hands clasped. He'd worn the badge for 30 years. He knew how the culture worked, knew how silence protected people like Donaldson. He stood. "We have good cops," he said, "but when the bad ones speak, the good ones can't stay quiet anymore." No one said it, but everyone felt it. Something was changing. The podium outside the Staples Center stood framed by a sea of microphones. Reporters jostled for position as camera lenses pointed like rifles toward the man behind the mic. Magic Johnson adjusted his blazer, took a slow breath, and began. "I didn't ask to be here today because of what happened," he said. "I'm here because of what keeps happening." A hush fell. Even the helicopters overhead seemed to quiet. I've played on the biggest stages in the world. I've faced the fiercest competition. But nothing prepares you for a moment when your humanity is questioned because of your skin. He paused. I wasn't angry when that officer told me to go back to Africa. I was tired. Behind him stood community leaders, athletes, pastors, and yes, Sergeant Michelle Ortega in uniform, arms folded with quiet solidarity. But this story isn't about Magic Johnson. It's about the millions of black men pulled over with no reason. It's about the fear that too many parents feel when their kids leave the house. Reporters scribbled furiously. So here's what I'm doing, he continued. I'm funding a training program for young officers, led by veterans of both law enforcement and civil rights. I'm sitting down with LAPD leadership, and I'm not walking away until real reform happens. A final breath. We're not going back anywhere. We're going forward. The crowd erupted. For once, it wasn't just a sound, it was a signal. In a high-rise conference room overlooking downtown Los Angeles, the mood was tense but measured. Magic Johnson sat at the head of a long, polished table, across from LAPD Chief Cassandra Reyes, flanked by legal counsel, civic leaders, and senior officers. Reyes folded her hands. You've made your position clear, Mr. Johnson, but real reform takes more than headlines. I'm not here for headlines, Magic replied. I'm here because I don't want another black man to survive on charisma when the law won't protect him. Someone from the legal team interjected, We're reviewing Officer Donaldson's record. This is an HR issue. No, Magic said, calm but firm. It's a leadership issue. Silence followed. Ortega spoke up from the back. We need accountability metrics, not just for officers on the street, but for those behind the desks, behind the excuses. Chief Reyes exhaled slowly. So what are you asking for? Magic leaned forward. Mandatory racial bias training, independent civilian review boards. Real penalties for misconduct and not just paid leave. A councilwoman next to him nodded. The people outside this building, they're not asking anymore. They're watching. Reyes glanced out the window, where another peaceful protest was forming, signs raised toward the sky. We'll draft the proposal, she said, and you'll help shape it. Magic gave a single nod. Let's build something that doesn't need to be burned down. For the first time, no one spoke over him. The sun dipped low over Crenshaw Boulevard as Sergeant Michelle Ortega parked her cruiser outside the community gym. Inside, a town hall was being held, not with cameras or reporters this time, but with cadets. Fresh uniforms, new faces, some hopeful, some hardened. Magic Johnson stood at the front, holding a folded note in his hand. He looked around the room, met each pair of eyes. Not as a legend, as a witness. I won't speak long, he began, because I've learned the most important part of leadership is listening. He looked down at the note, unfolded it slowly. This is a letter I got from a 12-year-old boy in Inglewood last week. He read aloud. Dear Mr. Johnson, I used to want to be a police officer, but now I'm scared. If they said that to you, what would they say to me? He paused, letting the weight of the words settle. I came here because of what happened to me, he continued. But I'm staying because of what we owe him. A young cadet near the back raised his hand. What if we don't fit the mold of what the badge used to stand for? Ortega spoke up. Then you redefine it. Magic nodded. You protect, you serve, you don't forget who the badge belongs to. It's not yours, it's theirs. As the cadets stood to applaud, Ortega caught his eye from the side of the room. No words were needed. The shift had begun. 6 months later, the city felt different. The reform program Magic helped launch had graduated its first class of officers. Civilian oversight boards were no longer symbolic. They had teeth. Officer Donaldson had resigned under public pressure, his name now etched into a very different kind of legacy. But that wasn't the story Magic wanted remembered. He stood on the court at a community gym now renamed the Legacy Center. Kids ran drills in donated Lakers gear. A young girl dribbled past 2 boys and laid the ball up like she was born to lead. Her jersey read Johnson in gold letters. Sergeant Ortega joined him on the sidelines, arms crossed, a soft smile on her face. You ever think it had come to this? Magic chuckled. I never wanted to be a symbol. But I knew I had to be something. She nodded. You were more than something. You were steady. They watched the game for a moment. Do you think it'll last? Ortega asked quietly. Magic looked around, at the coaches teaching with care, at the cadets volunteering without orders, at the murals now painted with messages of dignity and courage. It'll last, he said. Because we stopped waiting for change, we became it. Later that evening, Magic sat at home reading another letter, this time from that same 12-year-old in Inglewood. It ended with one line, I want to be a leader, just like you. And for the first time in a long time, Magic Johnson let the tears fall, not from anger, not from exhaustion, from hope.